This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome everyone to Pensacola State Perspectives. I'm your host, Patrice Witten, Executive Director of the Foundation and College Development here at Pensacola State College. We're here at the Anna Lamar Switzer Center for Visual Arts, where the work of world-renowned artist Christo and his late wife, Jeanne-Claude, is on exhibit. We have as our very special guest the artist Christo. You might have heard of him or seen his work. Now, up close and personal, is the interview with Christo by our guest host and his longtime friend, Marcia Orr.
Thank you, Patrice. Joining me is Christo. My name is Marcia Orr. I'm from Tallahassee, and Christo and I were just talking about the 28 years ago now that Surrounded Islands, a project for Biscayne Bay, Miami, was done in Miami. And 29 years ago, I met you because you came to Tallahassee then, beginning your permitting process, which is a big part of every project that you do. You find the site, and then can you talk a bit about that permitting process, what you have to go through?
The permitting process was already started. We came to Tallahassee, Jeanne-Claude and myself, because we need to make a presentation to the Governor
Bob Graham.
Bob Graham.
Yes.
Bob Graham and his staff, because part of the many permits was also the state of Florida.
Yes.
There was the Dade County, all the community, city, Miami Village, in Miami Beach,
yes,
and United States Army Corps of Engineers, yes, and the state of Florida.
And each of the, up the 7 miles of the project, what wasn't known was that every little village along that 7-mile stretch, you had to go to those little groups of people and get permission to do each of the islands.
There was the city of Miami, Miami Village, and Miami Beach.
Yes, North Miami, didn't go that far.
No, okay. And these three entities, and I know that in Miami Village, I think, Miami, there was the mayor of Miami, there was community board, and we lost in one of the public hearings.
Yes.
And we got appeal again, and there very good footage of that very tumultuous discussion and the permitting process.
In the Maisels film, right?
In the Maisels films, Albert and David Maisels, yeah.
Albert and David Maisels, who are best known for Grey Gardens, right? The original,
Gimme Shelter.
And Gimme Shelter, yeah, the two documentary films. They were the documentary filmmakers that first sort of took the voiceover out and were just there filming whatever was going on around them at the time. And so that film will show a lot of that
exactly.
trauma.
Very depressed myself with Jeanne-Claude, and
yes.
And we tried to talking with the Commissioner Harvey Rubin. I remember
well.
Very well, and all that is in the film of the Maisels. It's a lot of preparation.
Right.
And
when you first came to Tallahassee, too, I remember when I met with you, it was a wonderful delight for me to know that you were doing a project in Florida. And I was working for the Secretary of State at the time as the visual arts coordinator for the state. And so I got to take you out to the Department of Environmental Protection, do all these things that see that the project was coming. And I ended up taking leave from my job, which some people thought I had taken leave of my senses to do that, to go work for Christo for 6 months.
Christo Jeanne-Claude.
Christo Jeanne-Claude, exactly. Because Jeanne-Claude, Surrounded Islands was her project.
Yeah, her idea.
Her idea.
And I remember there was called the Festival of the Two Worlds, something like that.
Yes, the Two World Festival.
It was originated that there will be symphony orchestra, etc., to do some project. And nothing happened of that festival. Anyway, we're here, and we were here before in Florida. I remember we have exhibition about the Rapcos in Australia, some college gallery in Miami area,
Yes.
in the early 70s.
Yes.
And we returned a few times to southern Florida, of course, not here. And and when we came for that particular time, we were driven by Beth Dunlap, who was the
Architecture critic for
of
the Miami Herald.
Herald.
Right.
But we were working already on the Pondorf project.
Yes.
And we started in 75 working in Paris. And Beth was aware about that. And Jeanne-Claude was always insisting that we should go over the causeway. And there was many bridges in the causeway. But I'm sort of thinking, you like to wrap a bridge? No, we're not a wrap a bridge. We're always looking for these little dotted islands. But nobody was aware that that was what we were looking.
Yes.
And we go home back, and I remember, and there was I did the first study, and it's actually the first press conference of announcing the project of the surrounded island is a very good footage in the
Maisels film as well.
Films, yeah.
Well, that brings up your process, because those drawings that you start doing, that is something that I think everyone would love to hear, how those drawings define and change over the course of the project.
Now, you should understand, all our project, they're unique image, meaning that we will never do the same things again. We will never surround other islands, never wrap another bridge or build another gates, meaning that I do put on paper our vision, but that is not sufficient to see how the project will look. It's clumsy, of course, sometimes quite accurate, but the material, the proportion, the way how the project will be realized, impossible. This is why for all our project we do and process and progress, we do several life size tests.
Yes.
Because we cannot do the entire project, but we can take it to one scale section of the project and elaborately working hard and find a way how to finalize many things, and from color to proportion to forms, etc. Now, the important part was that this project is the biggest amount of fabric we ever used in all our projects. It involved about near 6.5 million square feet of fabric, who is spread around these islands, surround these islands, and there was quite complicated how to do that test. And finally, Jeanne-Claude, I remember, she was saying, but look at it like a piece of a pie. We need to have this 220 feet, because from the beach to the boom is 220 feet, and we should cut arbitrary, like piece of the pie, because like type of trapezoid form of the, but we need to have this 220 feet. But where? And we have a friend, collector, and owner of this hotels around the world, John Sonaben and Roger Sonaben, have a property in Key Largo, because we like to do it in secret place. That nobody can see it, because everybody we were here. And the one big issue was the color. We are working in a very powerful sunlight, and the red, that very saturated pink color, actually pink red, is extremely fragile on the sunlight. We would try to find a way to fight that bleaching effect. Was I will come later to that. But anyway, we have an Australian company, I think, who was willing to go ahead that, and they fabricated the life-size test material. Everything was fabricated. Our team secretly, I don't know, many of us, there was about 50 people moving down to Key Largo.
Let me say something, too, about who those people were, because Christo brings the most expert people in the world, he finds, for whatever that need of the moment is. And he had what we call the boat people on the project were all out of Woods Hole, Massachusetts. They were the people who took scientists out for, you know.
And we had down there, and I remember Roger Johnson would give us that entire house. We were living in that house with many bedrooms. And in the morning, we have the houses on the front and the water. We start to unfurl the fabric with all this idea that need to be elaborate, think about and refine later when fabricate the project, building the project. And suddenly, there was a huge amount of helicopters over us. And I really remember the next moment, there was a front page in Miami Herald, the Christo secret test of the surrounded island. Everybody
You can't
saw
get
it.
away with anything, can you?
But
Nothing.
there was a big problem. In 24 hours, the fabric became white.
Oh,
And that was a huge, huge problem. There was no way to work with the other company. There was also, we were not sure they can deliver materials. Everything became very complicated with possible Australian company to deliver fabric. And finally, I remember we were get in position that we don't have anybody to make the fabric. There was another company near New York and Connecticut tried to do something, but the amount of fabric was so small, and they was not willing to do that. And
this is such an example of what you go through, Christo, because every project is different requirements, different people, changing constantly when you learn something like you learned about the color.
There was the color, but also there was another problem. That fabric needs to be sewn. The islands, they're surrounded with fabric, but actually they're not one piece of fabric. Often they're 5, 8, 7 sections who properly designed, they fit together and created that particular shape.
Yes,
around
because
the
the
islands.
exterior of the floating fabric
the boom, but-
echoed the shape of each island, so it had
Actually,
to be.
the shape of the island, the fabric repeat or magnifying the shape of the islands, and the engineer design section who they float to the islands and they laced together,
Yes,
laced
together.
together by special floating people in the water, and after that became one single piece of fabric. Now, but for that reason, we need to have a fabric woven on very large width. If you know, will be hundreds of seams to seam to seam to have this enormous amount of fabric together. And we will try to find company who can make the woven of the rolls of fabric big. And there was no way to find something in the United States. I remember finally we found a company in Germany who can woven the fabric in 17 feet wide.
Yeah, and it was a polypropylene that had air infused into it as well, so that the fabric.
But that is the floating story.
Yeah, the floating story.
Now, the fabric is woven. The only artificial fiber who is below the gravity of the water. Gravity of the water is 1. Was polypropylene who have the gravity is 0, 9, 8 to 7, but it was not sufficient. The buoyancy was not sufficient for us. We need to find a company who willing to the fabric come from extrusion of the petrochemical product, and actually the fiber is extruded in ribbons. And the engineer said the only way is that we inject 1 million bubbles of air, microscopic bubbles of air, in the extrusion of the fiber before, but not too much, because we need to woven the fabric. If the fiber became very weak, we will break. There was a lot of work, but finally we succeeded to have a fiber with gravity 0.48, who was very good for buoyancy. But the color problem was still there.
Yeah.
Was bleaching, and I don't know if you're familiar, the red color came from iron. And if you put more iron, the fiber became very heavy. And finally we have this very good pink color, but still Jeanne-Claude was not confident that he will work out. And I remember we talked with the public library in Miami that we will put 14 buckets of Biscayne Bay water on the roof of Miami Public Library, and each bucket there will be fabric sample of our pink fabric, and each day they will mail us one fabric sample to see to the 14 days how the fabric sample will change by the UV of Biscayne Bay. the sun, and everything worked very well. And finally, we were happy. It was not ending there. The story that I remember Ted Doherty.
Ted Doherty, the wonderful engineer, yes.
Yeah, chief builder and contractor. He was in charge to find the sewing company, but that is another problem story. The running fence and the valley curtain was sewn by the sewing company who was working for the army during the Vietnam War. They was doing this huge tent and a parachute, all kind of things, and they have a quite big facility for the army. They was running out of work because the war was ending,
Yeah.
and we go to the West Virginia. I remember trying to convince them to do that, but there was no way they can manage this huge width of fabric.
Yes.
And also, we really try to move it close to the site.
Yes.
And Ted finally said, but look, the only way is that we created our own factory.
Yeah.
Big deal.
Yeah.
We rented huge empty storage area around Opelika. We needed two areas, actually.
Yeah,
One was
Hialeah.
the blimp hangar on Opelika. One was the
Hialeah.
Hialeah, yeah.
Fabric factory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The blimp hangar was in Opelika. Hialeah was the factory.
Yeah.
And finally, in that factory, empty, very open space, we put railroad tracks, and we put our sewing machine on the railroad tracks. And instead to move the fabric, the sewing machine was moving on the railroad tracks.
Yes.
This 220 long
220 feet long
seams.
Every-
After that was the folding, you know.
Oh, yes.
Because all these about 70 variety of sections need to be folded, transported in our staging area north of Biscayne Bay.
Yes, which, by the way, Christo leased that area from the state of Florida because it was a big, open, undeveloped space
Yeah.
that belonged to the state.
Yeah.
So every step of the way, you are paying
Yes.
for...
Everything was paid with our money. There were no grants, no...
Exactly. This
Even
is-
every worker was paid. Everybody was paid.
And that was one of the things people have asked about volunteering, and they would call the office where I was and wanting to volunteer, and several Florida Arts Council members, oh, we want to come and work. No, they all got a check. Christo accepts no volunteer labor.
But Jean-Claude loved to say that we do not accept volunteer because they are not, our work is not a picnic. And when it accept, and we don't accept volunteer because volunteer cannot be fired if they don't work well.
Fired, right. So
And this is a very utmost of, but also we need to have a workman compensation insurance, all variety of things
Yes.
to be involved with our projects. Yes.
talk a minute about when you were a young artist, because this capitalist system that you now work in, you went to school, were born in Bulgaria in 39, the same
35?
year. 35? Oh, I
My
did
dear,
get it.
35.
I had it right to begin with. Okay. 30. The same year Jeanne-Claude was born in.
Same day.
Same day.
June 13th.
In France, and you were born. No, she was born in Morocco.
Casablanca, because her father was in the army there.
He was in the military.
Morocco.
Yes.
And Morocco was a French colony.
And you were in Bulgaria
Yeah.
and go to art school. And I remember a story about that you told about what you had to do. The Orient Express went through Bulgaria.
I was going to art school in the early university, actually, in early 50. And many of you probably don't remember, only except all the people. This is the height of the Cold War. You know, the Stalin was still in power. Bulgaria was, at that time, it was very pro-Sovietic country, actually, by many circumstances, probably one of the circumstances, because Bulgarian language is almost identical to the Russian. This is the only country who have the Cyrillic, absolutely. All other Slavic countries, they have Latin characters.
Really?
But Bulgaria, and their long, hundreds of year tradition of huge relation between Russians and Bulgarians. And the 1948 to 9 Bulgarian communist government cut all the diplomatic relations with the West. There was no American embassy, there was no French representative. And Bulgaria was very cornered with this support of the Soviet regime. And through Bulgaria also is in the end of Eastern Europe, there was passing Orient Express, you know, and
the train.
The train. And the communist government was very conscious and very eager that all the landscape around the Orient Express will be demonstrate that all the cooperative farms of the workers work properly. And art students was obliged to give their weekends to go to the countrysides to give advice to the farmers how they should pack their hay near the railroad tracks, how they should store their combine and tractors visibly around the railroad tracks to show that everybody worked hard. But this is something I learned to communicate to people outside of art community. You know, this is basically, you talk to people who don't know anything about art. And also I learned what is the 100 meters, 200 meters.
Sure.
In the real world. All these things was part of the things you learn. But also, I was saying yesterday night in the lecture, I was in these first 4 years, you know, in Bulgaria. That time the art academy was the very conservative model, like a 19th century art schools in Europe.
Yeah.
Very academic. And to become architect, painter, sculpture, or decorative artist, you go to the 8 years of study. The first 4 years, you study everything, and after past these 4 years, you study another 4 years, and then decided to be specialized architect, painter, sculpture. And I was still in these first 4 years, study architecture, painting, sculpture. Even I have a semester of medicine, cutting human body, learning the muscles, everything.
Learning anatomy,
and it was a part of that whole study and education.
So, and then though, getting out in the fields and the country and in the landscape, you were doing that, then you escape because you hated doing that.
Escape, no, I don't escape right away from Bulgaria. Bulgaria was cornered. There was the Yugoslavia, there was the impossible to escape from Bulgaria. But I was visiting my relatives. I'm also Czech, half Czech. I was in Prague, Czechoslovakia in 1956, when Hungarian Revolution started in 1956 in the autumn.
Yes.
And there was a huge amount of refugees escaped to the west. And we're too old, but young people do not know that. There was also when the Nasser take over Suez Canal, the British Air Force was bombarding Egypt, and French also bombarding Egypt. Almost everybody was thinking that the Third World War will start. This is the 1956-57.
Yes, that was a terrible...
and there are a huge amount of people escaped from Hungary and Czechoslovakia to the west, in Vienna, Austria.
How do you think all of that, like being a young person, growing up with all of that going on, affected how you function in the capitalist system with producing your art and funding your art?
I can tell you how. You know, also I was very, very deeply educated Marxist.
Oh, okay.
And I learned the capitalist system. Actually, to learn the capitalist system, you should read the Capital. That's Capital of Karl Marx.
Of course.
Yeah, and it's the absolutely expressing what's that. And this is why I tell you, because nobody asked me yesterday in a lecture how this work is done. To create our project of art, we need funds. We need to. They're large outdoor things that they cost much more than to buy paint, canvas, or some brushes to make painting.
Yes.
And there was the necessary to have funds to pay that. And I find it that the preparatory works, all the material I do before the project, they are very important for aesthetical decisions of the project, to get the permission, but they have their own value. The little sketches, little collages, drawings of our projection, how the work will look, they have an independent value. They are like things themselves. Their works can be hung on the wall, they can be bought, they have a marketing value that can be resell. And this is a way we can generate funds to pay for our project. Through the years, we understand that we need to, because our project deals with that huge complexity of fabrication and production, we need to create a structure how to be built. And in the early 70s, our chief lawyer, Scott Horace, Chicago, decided that we need to create a corporation.
Yeah.
Normal corporation who pay taxes. And that corporation was created to build our project, to sell our original works of art, and to buy back our original works of art. And the corporation is CVG Corporation. Actually, it's my
CVJ,
initial,
yeah.
Christo Vladimir of Ivashev. Vladimir is my father name. And that,
Yavashev is the last name,
yeah,
right?
and that corporation is New York Delaware Corporation, is the holding company who created subsidiary each time we do project. For example, there was a Surrounded Island Corporation, Florida Corporation, who physically pay the bills and make the Surrounded Island project, but the money was coming from CVG Corporation, who was selling the original works of art. And that corporation really worked that. When Surrounded Island was over, finished, that corporation dissolved, we go to the next. For example, right now, because we have a very advanced stage of Over the River, we have Over the River Corporation in Colorado from the CVG Corporation.
Right.
And if you go to the Christo Jean-Claude Harvard Business School, they work for 2 years just after the gates, and there are a lot of explanation, banking,
Of
blah,
how the
everything,
business
how the
part of it
project is
worked,
paid,
but
and it can go through in the diagrams and all
Well,
these
this
things.
is one of the big myths, though, Christo, because people think, oh, he gets grants, corporations give him money, or he does advertising, which, of course, you do not do, even the AT&T thing. You have a disclaimer at the bottom, not connected. But all of your own money funds these projects, and therefore no control. You aren't being sent out into the countryside to do something at somebody, a government's bidding. You are doing what you want, how you want to do it, without that extra. So in a capitalist society, you are
absolutely and
truly a businessman.
We involve it. We are responsible to many contracts, all kind of work, bills we need to pay and all.
But the beauty of the work, we need to talk about that too, so that that doesn't get lost. There's so much detail and so much work that goes into this that people, it's hard for somebody to grasp it all, of the 20 different realized large-scale projects.
22.
22. Whoops, okay, I've lost count. But it's the beauty and the elegance that these pieces have in the environment. Talk about that a little bit, how you see the relationship to, well, I'll give an example, that Surrounded Islands.
Because it's not general. We should try to talk
Specifically,
one project
let's talk about logs then.
Surrounded Island, because really we're in Florida.
Okay.
Each project have its own history. The Surrounded Island cannot apply it to something else. But
yes,
anyway,
exactly.
I say that we arrived here in southern Florida in early 70s, and I was very struck myself, Jean-Claude, by the flatness flatness of the space. You know, this is incredible flatness, horizontality was something I never so abundant, so available, and also the humidity, the thick air, full of water, all these things was very strange. And the very end, you see, after so many years after that, we did the flattest project we ever did it.
Yes.
Thank you for that very insightful interview, Marcia. This concludes this edition of Pensacola State Perspectives. For more information, please visit our website. Thank you for watching.